Hey everyone, and welcome to the Deep Dive. We're going on an adventure today, a journey to the heart of Brazil, to a region called the Sertão.
Oh, the Sertão, a land of extremes.
Exactly. And our guide for this journey is Euclides da Cunha's book, Os Sertões. It means the Backlands.
Published in 1902, it's a powerful book, really more than just a travelogue. It tells the story of the Canudos War, a conflict between the Brazilian government and a religious community in the late 19th century.
So we've got a remote region, the Sertão, a charismatic leader, and a clash that erupts into a war. Sounds intense.
It is. The book dives deep into what caused this conflict, but it also paints a vivid picture of the Sertão itself, the environment, the people, the way of life, and how it all connects to the war.
So for this deep dive, we're going to pull out those key insights, explore the Sertão, get to know the people who live there, and understand the forces that led to this war.
To really understand the Canudos War, you've got to understand the setting. Imagine vast, sun-baked plateaus,
Yeah.
scrubland vegetation, and cycles of intense drought and torrential rain.
That's a world away from the beaches of Rio, huh? Doesn't sound like a tropical paradise.
Not quite. The book actually describes the terrain as the martyrdom of the earth, brutally struck by variable elements.
Wow. And to highlight just how harsh it is, the dryness could mummify dead animals.
Yes. The book mentions a soldier who died in battle and was found months later perfectly preserved by the climate.
That's incredible. Life persists, though, right? How did plants and animals adapt to such an unforgiving environment?
Well, Da Cunha highlights some amazing adaptations. Take the Wazero tree, for instance. It thrives in the dry season, boosting with golden flowers. And then there are the cacti, the towering mandicaras, the low-lying kipahs, all expertly adapted to conserve water.
So it's a landscape of extremes, from bone dry to sudden downpours. How does that impact the land?
The rainy season completely transforms everything. Da Cunha describes it as a sudden shift, saying, "The traveler, astonished, no longer sees the desert. Imagine carpets of amaryllis flowers, cararibas and baraunas trees flourishing, and umbizeros dotting the landscape with their white flowers. A burst of life after months of desolation."
Wow, that's incredible. But it's not just the plants, right?
Yeah.
This environment must have shaped the people, too.
Absolutely. The Sertão created a distinct type of person, the Sertanejo.
The Sertanejo.
Yes. Strong, resilient, adaptable. They're accustomed to hardship and sudden change, just like the environment they live in. They mirror the volatile environment.
You know, it's interesting. You could compare the Sertanejo to the Gaucho.
The Gaucho from southern Brazil.
Yeah. They're both kind of shaped by their environments.
Yeah.
But in very different ways.
Oh, absolutely. And you can see it in how they dress. The Sertanejo wears leather for protection from thorns and the terrain. Very different from the Gaucho's more stylish attire.
Yeah, for sure. It's all about practicality in the Sertão. But despite the hardships, they seem really connected to their land and livestock, even working for, well, absentee landowners.
Yeah, that connection is key. The book talks about the vaqueros, the cowboys,
Yeah.
and they have incredible skills. I mean, they could identify individual cattle from afar, like just based on branding marks, or even lineage.
Wow, that's wild.
It really shows how deep their knowledge of their animals is.
It's like they have a sixth sense about their cattle. And I love how they rely on traditional knowledge. Like the book even mentions treating sick animals with prayer instead of conventional medicine.
Right. It shows a different way of looking at the world, a different way of thinking about the natural world. And beyond that, there's a strong sense of community, of shared traditions. The vaquejada, the cattle roundup, it's a huge social event. And then there are the evenings filled with music and dancing and a really deep religious faith.
So we have this mix of resilience, tradition, and spirituality. But how did this unique culture even come to be?
Well, the book really dives into the history of the Sertão,
Yeah.
and you can see layers of influence, like from indigenous and African traditions,
Yeah.
and the impact of colonial rule, too. You know, it even mentions Jesuit missions way back in the 17th century that tried to integrate the indigenous populations.
And it's in this unique cultural landscape that Antonio Conselheiro comes in, right?
Yeah.
He's described as both a brute Gnostic and a great man in reverse.
Yeah, and he's definitely a product of all these influences. And his character is full of contradictions, which makes him even more interesting to study. I mean, his life story is amazing. Family feuds, personal tragedies, a turn towards religion. It makes sense that his prophecies would resonate with the Sertanejos.
Right, he tapped into their fears and frustrations. His message of religious purity, social justice, it offered them hope.
Yeah.
Hope in a harsh and rapidly changing world.
Exactly. And that message led to the founding of Canudos. It was more than just a refuge. It was a challenge to the authority of the new Brazilian Republic.
Which I guess brings us to the central part of the book, the clash between the community and the Brazilian army.
Yes. The government saw Canudos as a threat. Like a symbol of backwardness and rebellion. They launched expeditions to crush the community, and they really underestimated how determined the Sertanejos were.
And the book doesn't hold back on the brutality of the war. Those descriptions of violence and executions are rough.
Yeah, it's unsettling. Da Cunha's account is gripping, but he's not glorifying the conflict. He's exposing the human cost of this clash of ideologies.
There's that chilling story about a captured child with a bullet wound across his mouth. It's a stark reminder of how war impacts innocent lives.
Right. And the book criticizes the government's actions. It questions their motives in crushing this marginalized community.
It's clear that Os Sertões is more than just a war story. It's a commentary on society, a reflection on what happens when we neglect and demonize those on the fringes. Makes you wonder what happened after a traumatic event like that. I mean, did they rebuild? Did the Sertões just go back to how it was?
Da Cunha doesn't really give us a clear answer about what happened next. But it definitely makes us think about the effects of conflict, the clash of cultures. It's like a reminder that history isn't just about what happened. It's about the people and places involved.
So we have this image of the Sertão, this harsh, almost mythical place, that shapes its people. It's a big part of the book. Is it still like that today? Has it changed much?
That's a great question. The Sertão's still there, of course, but Brazil has gone through so many changes in the past century. Modernization, industry, migration, it's all impacted the region.
You mentioned that the Sertanejos often worked for absentee landowners. Is that still the case?
Well, things have evolved. There's been land reform and activism and more focus on social justice, but there's still inequalities for sure. Poverty and drought, those challenges are still there.
So it's a region with a complicated past and an uncertain future. But it sounds like Os Sertões gives us some insights into the challenges they face, maybe even challenges other regions are facing too.
Oh, definitely. Da Cunha's work goes beyond the specifics of this one time and place. It makes us think critically about the things that shape our world. Environmental challenges, social inequalities, the clash between tradition and, modernity.
It makes you wonder if there are any modern-day parallels to Canudos, groups who feel marginalized or misunderstood, even, demonized.
That's a really interesting thought. You see movements all over the world that touch on some of the same ideas. Resistance to authority, the search for identity, the fight for recognition.
So as we wrap up, what are some key things you think are helpful to understand the legacy of Os Sertões?
I think the biggest thing is to remember that it's more than just a war story. It's a really complex look at the human condition set against this, unique environment. It challenges us to see the world through the eyes of those who are often forgotten.
And it reminds us that the past isn't really over and done with. It's still shaping our present. And I guess understanding stories like Canudos can help us navigate the world we live in.
Yeah. Os Sertões is a powerful book. It reminds us of the power of place and the resilience of people and the importance of empathy and understanding in a world that's full of differences.
Well said. This has been a fascinating deep dive into Os Sertões. We've explored this harsh landscape and this unique culture and really tried to grapple with this tragic conflict. We hope you've gained some new insights and maybe even some new questions to think about. Thanks for joining us.